Hi everyone. In this video, I am going to explain the changes I did to make this overpaint. This is the overpaint itself, and this is the original piece from a patron. He submitted his work for review, and you can do the same by subscribing to the critic tier on my Patreon. By the way, this is a public version of this video because of that I had to censor it, and I could not include the time lapse. And it's shorter than the one that is on my Patreon. So if you're interested in either the review or the videos I produce, in Patreon I have a longer version, and I also have I don't have any censor there. Okay. Okay, let's start. In the original, one of the first things I noticed is that there was a bit of lack of hierarchy with the lines. What I mean by that, you can see here, for example, that the line that was used for the contour is in general thick and very dark. And it is the same with the breast, okay? There are some thinner lines for the up section. However, those lines don't taper, and tapering is a very sometimes very overlooked feature, and it's something that you should try to employ more. There is a small tapering here, actually. However, here at the start of this line, there should be a more a thinner end for that line, and I am going to explain why. In the overpaint, you can see that there is an overlap using just like in the original. However, that overlap at each end is more or less taper because the conditions, the lining conditions, are not the same. Here, for example, the form is turning from our view, okay, and the rib cage and the breast are very compressed there. Okay, there is also these limbs, the upper limbs, that are causing the light to to being unable to reach this crevice. Okay, that's an occlusion shadow. Remember that occlusion shadows are when you have two or more planes that meet each other, and the light cannot quite enter here. So the photons tend to bounce outside that area because there are too many planes and the space is too small for the light to enter. The opposite is happening here. This is a very open area, as you can see. This area catches the light, and the difference between the breastplane and the ribcage plane here is not as strong as the difference between the breast and the ribcage here. Here is a more perpendicular kind of angle. You can see it in the contour. In fact, it's not quite a straight angle, but it's more perpendicular than the one here. That is very obtuse. Okay. So I hope you can see how the nuance at the end of a line can convey some information when you try to employ that kind of line tapering. Okay. Also, line width in other areas is also a way to convey information about how close or how much light is catching that plane that represents that line. This is in the original, as I mentioned. Okay. This is very good because you can see how this breast in the bottom area has a thicker line compared to this other area for similar reason as this other breast. Okay. So yeah, I hope that was clear. So let's move to another point. Another thing I noticed is that compared to the reference, the original looked very stiff. It lost a lot of that gestural energy from the reference, and I tried to recover some of that. One very clear example is this leg here, the right leg is because it has this kind of bandage here. This piece of clothing, I don't know what's the name of it, but it covers that bump of the knee and the frontal side of the knee and the sorry, the medial side of the knee. So it helps to convey that it's a very gestural shape what we have here. So I decided to find a compromise. Okay, since this is the sketch was supposed to be nude, was supposed to be naked. I tried to remain to respect that, and I tried to also respect the gestural line of the reference. You can see here, for example, that the lateral line of the leg and the thigh is almost the same. It's like a lost and found line, is what I call this kind of line, that you can trace a continuous contour. However, that continuous contour is interrupted by a anatomical landmark, which is the knee. Okay, and in the original, the issue is that you have this um, the contour is kind of suggesting that each thing is doing its own thing. Okay, there are many bumps that are very symmetrical, for example, and there are other areas that are very symmetrical, but in the opposite way. They are very concave. So when you do that kind of thing, you are killing your gesture. Okay, and in the overpaint, I try to recover gesture by try to attach each landmark, each shape to that gestural line. I hope you can see how. Hold on. I actually made a stroke in the wrong layer. Anyway, I hope you can see how the gesture is recovered in the overpaint. Okay. Another area in which this is very visible too is in the upper limbs. Okay, you can see that the reference, the lines of the lateral lines of the forearm are very convex. Okay, and in the original, that convexity is lost because you have this sunken area here that should not be there, and there is like a here, for example, this is overly straight. Okay, and that convex nature of the reference is lost. In the overpaint, what I did was to try to recover that gesture, just like in the case of the leg. And you can see here, for example, that there is a bump in the wrist. I try to smooth that transition between the hand and the wrist by making the peak area here, where the ulna ends, a bit more muted than in the original. You can see the difference here. And that helps to create a continuous convex line or semi-convex line on the outer area. And this is very important because I am not missing the boxy nature of the wrist. I am just trying to adapt that boxy wrist into the convex contour. Okay, same case here. You can trace the boxy nature of that wrist, but it does not affect the contour. It is mostly convex, just like in the reference. You can see it more clearly if you zoom out. So I suggest you zoom out your drawings too to check the gesture. Okay, because sometimes you zoom in too much and you are just seeing the landmarks in isolation, which can be good for cleaning up your line work. But in order to check your gesture, I suggest you zoom out. Okay. You can also check your gesture looking at the negative space. For example, you can see it here. There is a negative space. And if I were to, let's do that again. If I were to check that negative space, that rhythm, you can see that it's mostly there too in the overpay. And it does not quite track here because, as I say, there are too many bumps, many symmetrical bumps. So that's another way to check your gesture, looking at the negative space and what kind of shape that negative space has. Okay. Okay, let's move. I hope that was clear. Let's zoom in into the face. And the problem I saw with the face is similar to what I said at the start, that the lines were not tapering. So there are too uniform. And in the case of the face, especially, you have to treat the face with certain nuance, okay? Because your forms, your features are very small. So you need to be very careful and don't Don't rush too much with the features. One thing I noticed was the mouth. The mouth was too forward, uh, and it was also too low. Remember that if you remember the Loomis method, for example, the line of the mouth has to be in the upper first third of the lower third of the face. Okay, so it's a sub third of the main third of the face. This means that if I were to take, for example, the original, let's mask this area here, and I were to liquefy just that section and try to follow that, making the mouth a bit more backward and making it into that first third of the lower third of the face, you will have something more characteristic just by moving that landmark along. You can check it and see that it looks a bit better. So yeah, try to check that aspect of your feeders to because it's a very small thing, okay? And in the original, you can see that the mouth is a bit more backward, and it's also in that first third. And sorry if that was a bit too messy, but when I mean the lower third, I mean this from the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the jaw. So you're making another division of thirds, and the mouth, the line of the mouth, has to be in that upper third. That has to be more clear. Sorry about that. Um, so yeah, I hope that was helpful. Let's see what else we can check this here. Oh yeah, broken lines. That's something I added in the overpaint too, uh, because I feel that by breaking the lines, you gain more depth, and you gain a more interesting visual experience. Here, for example, or you can see that the tie is overlapping, is closer to us compared to the waist. In the original, sorry, in the overpaint, I I broke that line of the waist because I want to mimic the effect of the atmospheric perspective. I am basically letting the background enter the subject because it's a bit too far, so the contrast lowers. So that alone is telling the viewer, oh, this is behind the tie. It's not only the overlap. I am making my overlap stronger by breaking that line. Okay. Another area is here on the back biceps. The forearm is obviously closer to us, and the biceps is a bit farther. So it's okay if you do a small break there, and you can go even further and lower the contrast as I am doing right now by smudging that area. I hope you can see how you are creating a richer visual experience because you are not only breaking the lines, you are also creating a contrast of edges. You have a strong hard edge here, and you have a soft lost edge, soft and lost edge here. Okay, so that contrast is more, it makes for a more interesting visual experience. Okay. Another way to break the lines is to suggest, to imply a rim light. Here is a reason different from the other two. What I mean by that is that here, for example, I am suggesting that there is a secondary light that is hitting that tie, and the secondary light is strong enough that the bloom caused by that secondary light is erasing the contour. You can imagine that light is bouncing, is created a bloom, and the contour is becoming lost. Sorry, that arrow probably was not the best example. A better example will be to use white and make that light stronger. So by making that light stronger, you are basically erasing the contour and suggesting a rim light. Okay. Okay. Let's see what else we have. There are many subtle changes, and as I mentioned, the Patreon video is more complete. Um, oh yeah, this thing here, the bulges. I noticed that my Patreon tried to do the bulge here of the underwear, but the problem is that there is no underwear. So uh, basically, there are only three landmarks that you need to represent in that side of the contour. You have the rib cage that is going to be in front of the obliques. The obliques are the soft mass here, and the waist. Those are the only three landmarks that are going to influence the contour in that side. Not only that, but also the contour is telling me the nature of those landmarks. What I mean by this, sorry, is that the rib cage is a bony area. Okay, so it's going to be straight. It's going to be hard. The obliques is a muscle group that is being compressed between the rib cage and the waist. So you have that bulging soft area, and because it is soft, it's going to be curved. Okay, and the waist, which is also like the rib cage, a bony area, and it's going to be hard. So yeah, I hope you can see how those three landmarks sculpt that contour, and it's easier to understand than in the original. Okay, I think those are the main changes. There are others, as you can see. I also include a PSD, so you can do this thing on your own and notice better the changes, the subtleties of the overpin. And yeah, that's about it. I hope this was useful. In case you are interested, you can submit your works for me to review on my Patreon. You get 4 reviews per month, one each week, and you can submit anything: your work in progress, your finished pieces, your sketches, your studies, as in this case, your original pieces. And you can contact me over Discord if you have any question, any doubt about what I did. I am open for you to ask me on over Discord, and you can ask me about other things related to art. I will try to be as helpful as possible. And I don't only have the reviews, of course. I have other things, so feel free to check it out. So yeah, that's about it for this review. I hope it was useful, and I hope to see you later. Bye.